Welcome to Gman Gaming and Reviews. Today we're going to do a video about a guide to Helldivers stratagems from levels 0 to 15, right? Because that's what I've unlocked. Now this guide is mostly going to talk about stratagems, but it will cover weapons because it also does affect your loadout. So you can find your stratagems in the shipment. Now I haven't unlocked all of them, but I've pretty much seen a lot of them, so I'm pretty familiar with what they all do, or almost all of them. So we'll start with the Patriotic Administration Center. So one of the earliest ones that you're going to unlock is the MG43 machine gun, right? So this is in the support weapon category. So when you play as a Helldiver, you'll have a primary weapon, a secondary weapon, and a support weapon. Now there's lots of support weapons to choose from, in the same way that as you unlock requisitions, you'll unlock more primary weapons and secondary weapons. But your support weapon slot is really important because there's a lot of them, but you can and they're all sort of useful, but you can only hold one of them at a time. So the support weapon you pick is kind of going to matter, right? Now, the machine gun is probably going to be one of the earliest ones that you unlock. Now, another important thing to keep in mind is the call-in time, the uses, and the cooldown time, and as well as the stratagem traits. So you've got support weapon, which means it goes into your support weapon slot. Not sure what Hell Pod is. A medium armor penetrating, which means that it will penetrate up to medium armor, which is important depending upon what enemies you're dealing with. But the reality is that like most of the swarms that you're going to be dealing with will not be medium armor. But it is something to keep a note. I'm not necessarily a big fan of the machine gun, simply put because I replaced it with the Stalwart and I haven't looked back. The fact that it has a stationary reload, which means you can't move while you're reloading it, means that I don't tend to find it very useful for what it wants to do. I think the Stalwart is a better machine gun for doing what it wants to do, but I'll talk about that a little bit later. So next we'll talk about the anti-material rifle. Now, the anti-material rifle is a support weapon, as it says there. Hell Pod, I think it means comes down, and heavy armor penetrating. Now, the heavy armor penetrating is what makes this very interesting. It means that it can actually destroy enemies with heavy armor. This includes things like, I believe, charges, which can be very difficult to take down normally. Once again, it's a good weapon if you're playing in a team, because you want to be quite long range when you use this weapon. As like it says, it has to be aimed down scope. So especially if you combine it with the jump pack stratagem to get nice and high and have a good field of view, this one can be very useful. I don't find myself using it very much because I tend to play solo most of the time, but it is very useful. Next we come to the Stalwart, which is my main weapon of use. So the Stalwart, I unlocked this you unlock it very early on. I think you unlock it at level 5, and it's my main support weapon. I always take it. Guaranteed I'll always have a Stalwart. The reason I like this particular weapon so much is that it only has 3 magazines as opposed to the 6 or 7 that the primary weapon carries, but the magazine size is so large that you're very rarely going to be reloading this weapon in comparison to, say, your primary weapons, right? And especially when you're dealing with the bugs, you need a weapon that can clear out large swarms, as you can see here in the video, and it makes the Stalwart very useful. It is my main weapon. I use it as a primary weapon. And then what I do is for my I use it as a support weapon, but I mainly use it as my primary weapon of choice. And I tend to use I tend to use my primary weapon as a medium armor penetrating weapon to deal with those more heavily armored enemies, right? So Stalwart is very, very good. There's something that I didn't discuss. So you got call-in time, which is how long it takes to call in once it deploys. Not really that important for a machine gun or an anti-material rifle because you probably won't be calling it in when you're swarmed with enemies. but something to keep in mind. And the cooldown uses is you can use it an unlimited amount of times. Cooldown is how long it's going to take to use after you've already used it. So yeah, something to keep in mind. The next one that we're going to come across is your first anti-tank weapon, which is the expendable anti-tank weapon. It is a expendable weapon. When you call it in, it will actually summon down 2 anti-tanks. They're both one shot. They have a cooldown time of 70 seconds, which is quite low. The only problem that I find with this particular weapon is that if you try to call it in while enemies are swarming you, you're probably, especially if you're being if a charge is charging at you and you're trying to call this in, just forget about it. If you've got nothing to take down that charger and you're hoping for this expendable anti-tank weapon, you're not going to be able to grab it while the charge is charging you. So this is one of those weapons that you call in before you need it, or just before you need it, right? It has a very low cooldown, so and you get 2 shots. You get 2 separate shots, so might want to make them count, but because it's got a very low cooldown, it's very useful. This is also very useful for dealing with automaton factories. So unlike Terminid bug nests, where you could just lodge any grenade down in order to destroy them, you need an anti-tank weapon to easily destroy a automaton factory. So if you're fighting against the automatons and you're going solo, you might need an anti-tank weapon potentially like this one in order to be able to destroy the factories. The next one is the recoilless rifle. This is basically like the anti-tank weapon, except it's not expendable. It takes up your support weapon slot and has a backpack, which you need in order to use the weapon. Stationary reload. So basically, like you can see here, that's the charger, by the way, just in case you hadn't seen one. It's an anti-tank support weapon that you carry with you. I don't generally take this very often, simply put because I generally tend to have my stalwart as my support weapon. But just be aware, if you want an anti-tank weapon that is going to be a permanent solution, you definitely want to take the recoilless rifle. So because you can always have it with you, it can be very useful if you're hunting charges. Very useful indeed. Next will come to the flamethrower. I haven't really used this, but if you like getting close and personal, this can be very useful, especially because the primary weapons don't tend to have a lot of ammunition. You'll be reloading them quite a bit. So if you, I take the stalwart because I like to sit back and shoot, right? But if you're planning to get close and personal, or you're more of an assault style character, then the flamethrower is probably going to be more up your alley. Just be aware though that if you do get that close, as you can see here, the Terminids will often try to encircle you. They're not stupid, so they won't just charge at you willy-nilly, so you can get encircled if you try to use this weapon. So you just need to be aware of that when you're using this weapon. The next weapon is the autocannon. It's a support weapon like the recoilless rifle. It's heavy armor penetrating, which means it's not anti-tank, but it is heavy armor penetrating. It has a stationary reload, which means it has a backpack. So you have to have the backpack with you, and you have to stay stationary in order to reload it. I also believe that you can get help with the reload. But it has more ammunition than the recoilless rifle does. I haven't really used this that much, to be honest. Like you can see here, it's good with heavy armor penetrating weapons, like if you're dealing with the Sentinels, I think they're called, or Scouts. But I'm not sure why you would take it over the recoilless rifle, because the recoilless rifle is full anti-tank, right? Whereas the autocannon is only heavy armor penetrating. So my opinion is, if you're going to take a heavy weapon, you're better off taking the recoilless rifle, because it deals with anti-tank, which means it'll pretty much deal with anything, including tanks. Whereas the autocannon will only deal with up to heavy armor penetrating, so there's enemies that it won't be useful against. The next one is the heavy machine gun. I gotta be honest, I tried this weapon once. I definitely do not like it. The reason that I do not like it is because it's like their machine gun, but it's much harder to control, and it tends to run out of ammunition very quickly, which is not very useful for a machine gun. So, like I said, it could be useful if you're taking it in a team, if you want to be able to lay down heavy armor machine gun fire. Could be useful in that respect, but because I tend to play solo, I tried this once and I didn't find it very useful at all. It definitely isn't going to replace the stalwart for me. The next one is the air burst rocket launcher. This one is actually pretty good for dealing with swarms of enemies. It's medium armor penetrating, which means it will deal with most enemies. And it has a very good area of effect, as you can see in the video. I've seen this used personally. It's a very, very good weapon. Especially if you want to sit back and take out swarms of enemies. Basically, it almost functions like an eagle bomb, right? Because you could just sort of sit back, like if you've got like a Terminated base or an automaton base, and just start lobbing rockets into it, right, to destroy everything in there. And because it's medium armor penetrating, it's pretty much going to destroy everything apart from anything that requires anti-tank, basically, or heavy armor penetrating. The next one is the Commando, which is basically an upgrade of the expendable anti-tank. It's also expendable. It has it's double the cooldown time basically of the expendable anti-tank, but because it contains 4 rockets, and you only have to hold it once, so you don't have to fire a rocket and then go grab the other one. I think that this is a really, very good upgrade to the anti-tank. And because it's laser guided, it means that you can sort of sit back, especially when it comes to deal with basically a straight upgrade to the expendable anti-tank. Once you've got the Commando, I don't really see any reason to take the expendable anti-tank, right? Next we come to the railgun. Oh, hang on, no, that's available at level 20, so I don't have to talk about that. Good. Next we'll come to the orbital cannons. Now I gotta be honest, I don't really use these very much. I tend to use the Eagles, but they do have their uses. So the first one that you unlock is the orbital Gatling barrage. The good thing about this one is it's explosive, and it is heavy armor penetrating. So basically anything apart from that requires anti-tank, it will take out. The cooldown time is quite low. What is a problem is the call-in time. But with a ship module, you can actually get this down to a 1-second reduction, which actually makes it even better. But yeah, so it's a good stratagem because it has a very low cooldown time. The one thing that, and because it's heavy armor penetrating and explosive, which means it's pretty much good for dealing with anything, almost anything. The only thing about the Gatling barrage is the reason I take Eagles over orbitals in most cases is because Eagles have multiple uses and they have a very short cooldown time in between uses, right? Apart from when they have to rearm. So normally sometimes you'll have like an oh crap moment where you're just getting swarmed by enemies. Sometimes the ability to just call in lots of Eagle strikes can really help. That's one of the reasons why I don't tend to use it, but I tend to find people that I tend to play with tend to use orbital strikes quite a bit. So I think it's a personal preference choice. Do you want a shorter cooldown time, or do you want to have a potentially longer rearming time, but have multiple uses? It's up to you. It more depends on personal preference. The next one is the Airburst Strike. This one is medium armor penetrating, and it does a shrapnel in an area. It doesn't do anything against heavy armor, but for the most part, when you're dealing with swarms, you're most likely going to be dealing with swarms of light and with enemies that require light or medium penetrating armor. So overall, it's pretty good. The call-in time is quite high at 3 minutes and 45 seconds. The cooldown time is quite low. It's a little bit more than the Gatling barrage. This is probably one of those things that you want to use preemptively, rather than reactively, I think is the term. Rather than in a reactive way, because the cooldown time is quite high. The next one is the Orbital Barrage, 120 millimeters high explosive barrage. So this one is got a quite high call-in time, but the good thing about it is it's explosive and it's anti-tank. I think this one is more useful for destroying bug nests, or especially bug nests, because they tend to be, especially the larger ones, they tend to be sort of in a 360 degree arc from each other, and this one seems to go around in a 360 degree, so it's really good for taking out like big bug nests. So if you see a big bug nest, instead of just going in there, you start with an orbital barrage of this one and you let it go. The cooldown time is quite high, so if you stuff it up, you're not going to be able to use this for quite a while. The next one is the Orbital 380mm high explosive barrage. It's basically a more destructive version of the 120mm HE barrage. Has a higher cooldown call-in time. Use is unlimited, like with most weapons. It also is explosive and anti-tank. Basically, it's just a bigger version of the previous one. So it's pretty good. This one is pretty good to be used preemptively, like especially if you've got like a massive a Terminid base or a massive automaton base. Calling this in could be very useful. Calling this in and then hightailing it out of it can be very useful. The next one is the Orbital Barrage. This one is probably more useful against the automatons. Unlike the other ones, it has a much lower call-in time of 4 minutes and 45 seconds. It's also anti-tank. I would suggest that this one's actually really useful against Terminid, against automatons, especially with their bases, because of the way that they tend to organize them. So they tend to organize them in sort of like a 90-degree arc from each other, or a 180-degree arc. So you'll have like one on one side, one on another side. So especially with the automatons, because they tend to have tanks, this can actually be very useful if you position it really well. And I think that's the one crucial thing about this one. You need to position it really well, so that because the barrage is going to go forward, right? It's going to go left. It's forward on a right-left sort of arc. So as you can see here. So this one is probably very useful, especially if you're dealing with automatons, because I have had times when they were coming towards me in a swarm and I was hiding behind a rock. This one would have been very, very useful in that scenario, is to call it in and then just back off. Now, the next one is the Orbital Laser, which is one, as you can see, that I've unlocked. Now, this one is actually really, really good, but as you can see here, it's being used against a charger. It's very, very good for dealing with very large enemies. The only problem with it is orbital and it is anti-tank, so it pretty much destroys everything. The only problem with it is this use, and it has a very low call-in time, but the uses is the problem. This is only 3 uses in a match, right? So once you've used it 3 times, this stratagem is locked. You can't lose it anymore. You can't use it anymore. The only time that I would recommend this stratagem is if you're hunting chargers. It's very useful in that respect, because normally you only have to kill 2 chargers, and the thing is, chargers are very difficult to kill even with anti-tank weapons, especially if you don't hit them dead on. So, well, when I say anti-tank weapons, I mean like if you're doing a recoilless rifle, it's a different story, but with the other ones, it's going to take a considerable amount of firepower to take down. So if you get in the general vicinity of a charger, lobbing this thing in there, it'll kill it. So you can lob it in and then just run away and wait till the charger. Now, as you can see here, it goes after all enemies in an effective radius and has a certain amount of time. But like I said, this is a very situational one. If you are going to take it and you're not taking it to deal with charges, save it for the big bases, like a big base of Terminid bug nest or a big automaton base. But really useful when you're dealing with charges because of its abilities. You'll only have to deal with 2 charges in one of those missions, and it's very useful in that respect. Don't need to worry about that. Now we'll come to my beloved Eagles. Now, the thing about Eagles is that, as you can see here, they have a call-in time, which is generally lower than the. It's generally lower than the. It's generally lower than the orbitals, and it has a uses. So the way that Eagles work is that you have a certain number of uses, and then once it's used up, you have to rearm, right? So if you have multiple Eagle stratagems, when you do a rearm, the uses are separate from each other. So if you take Eagle Strafing Run and you take Eagle Airstrike, the uses are separate, but once you run out of uses of both of them, you'll have to rearm. So you'll have to wait for the Eagle to rearm, and while it's rearming, you can't use it. But the big advantage of the Eagles is that because as long as you've got uses, you can keep calling them in. There's only like a 10-second delay. They can be very useful for when you're dealing with like swarms of enemies, in a way that the orbital strikes are generally better used in against static things, or when you've got more time to react. The Eagles are more like the oh crap button. They're much more useful to be called in defensively. So the first one we come to is the Eagle Strafing Run. It's heavy armor. It says that it's a strafing run to clear small targets, but it is heavy armor penetrating, so it will kill most enemies. The next one is the Eagle Airstrike. This one is only got 2 uses, but it is explosive and it is anti-tank. So because it's an anti-tank, it can be used to take down automaton factories, and it can also be used to take down charges or weapons or things that require anti-tank. The next one is the Cluster Bomb, which is one of my favorites. The reason I love the Cluster Bomb is that it has 4 uses, and it's medium armor penetrating and explosive. So you're going to have a lot of uses of this one if you take it. And it's pretty good for dealing with swarms of enemies, right? It won't deal with anything that requires heavy armor penetrating, but most of the time when you're dealing with, if you take out all the swarms, you can focus fire on the enemies requiring heavy armor and take them out. The next one is the Napalm Strike. I'm not the biggest fan of this one, because I find that it didn't really stop the enemies very well with the fire. And the reality is that like stopping them is sort of great, but it would be better if it took them out. So it is explosive and it does do damage, but I tend to prefer the Cluster Bomb because it has more uses and it's medium armor penetrating. The next one is the Jump Pack. I haven't used this myself. Oh, actually I have used this. I haven't bought it, but I've used it. This one is better used for somebody who knows what they're doing with it. It's very useful for getting to high ground. So it's very useful in combination with the anti-material rifle in order to get to high ground, so that you can use it to take out enemies from damaging enemies from far away. Other than that, it does have a use. It speeds up your ability to traverse around the map. I think it does have a 30-second cooldown though in usage. But yeah, some people take it. I don't generally take it. If you are taking a backpack weapon system, you will not be able to use the jetpack weapon because the jetpack takes up your backpack slot. The next one is the Eagle Smoke Strike, which calls down a barrage of smoke grenades. really only useful against the automatons. There really would be no other reason that you would be bringing it down. For me personally, it would probably be better if you were playing with a team, and you were taking this as part of a support where other people are taking other stratagems. I can definitely see a use for it. I don't take it because I normally go by myself, and you only have 4 stratagem slots. So as much as I would like to take it, it doesn't really factor in to be very useful for me. But I can see a use for it against the automatons, especially if you need to get away. It does have its usage, but because there's only 4 stratagem slots, I don't tend to take it. But it could have a use. The next one is the Eagle rocket pods, 110mm rocket pods. I used it once on a charger. It didn't kill the charger, so I'm not a big fan of this one, to be honest. I think that it is anti-tank, but if you want anti-tank, you're better off taking the Eagle airstrike. It's a much better, because the honest to God truth is, with it says that it will release on the largest target near the stratagem beacon. I used this on a charge, it didn't take it down, so it's like I can't really see the point in using this rocket pods if it can't take down a charge in a single strike. The next one is the 500 kilogram bomb. This is like a nuke, as you can see here. I personally wouldn't take this until you get to the... where is it? Until you get to the stratagem that gives you extra weapons. Because only being able to take 1 is not that good. Being able to take 2 is absolutely awesome. Because if you take 1, it means that you have to rearm straight away. But being able to take 2 is really useful. I'm not certain if it would replace airstrike, because that's also anti-tank. But it could. It definitely could. So yeah, it's like the big bomb. Very, very useful. Or could be. Next, we're going to talk about the bridge, which has some more orbital stuff. The next is orbital precision strike. This one has a call-in time of 3.45 seconds. Unlimited. Cooldown time of 90 is really good. This one is explosive and it's anti-tank, right? Anything that's orbital will affect this. So any stratagems that you've got that target orbital will benefit this one as well. You unlock this one very early. It is very useful. You can use it to destroy automaton factories. The only problem with it is that, like, if there's more than one automaton factory, it won't be able to take them out. But then you can take an anti-tank weapon for that one. So it's explosive, but it's a good all-rounder. The call-in time is quite high, so it's better used offensively rather than in a reactive manner. The next one is the orbital gas strike. The cooldown time is quite good. The call-in time is quite high. It basically calls down gas that it does damage. It does caustic damage on automatons in an area. I don't really see a use for this one. I'd rather just blow them up. It doesn't kill enemies as fast as you think it does. It takes quite a while, and I just don't find it as good as the bomb. The next one is the orbital EMS strike. This one, as it said, it temporarily stuns all targets within the strike radius. I haven't really used this because, like, I could see, like, as you can see here, where it's stunning the charger. Stunning is good, but destroying is better. So I don't really see a use for this one, to be honest. The next one is the smoke strike, which is it drops smoke. It's like the smoke strike for the Eagle. basically it drops smoke. I tried it once against the automatons. The call-in time is quite high. If you want to use this, you'd probably be using this defensively, but I don't understand why you wouldn't just call in an airstrike, to be honest. If you got time to call in an orbital, if you got time to call in a smoke strike, you got time to call in an airstrike, or an orbital strike. So, yeah. The next one is the HMG emplacement. Helipod means that. Okay, it means it's deployed from a helipod. Basically, like a bigger version of the heavy machine gun. I haven't really used this. It's slow to turn, but I think it has a much better magazine capacity than the heavy machine gun does, because it's an emplacement, which would actually potentially make it very useful. The only reason I don't like it is it's very static. So it's definitely not going to replace my stalwart anytime soon, but I could see a reason to keep this as an extra stratagem, especially if it could be useful in a more of a static defensive manner. So basically, you could use it to sort of replace a Gatling sentry, because it's heavy armor penetrating, which means it's pretty much going to kill everything. So could be useful, but more on a static area. The call-in time is quite high, so you're not really going to be calling this down while you're being swarmed with enemies. This is more like when you're doing a submission or you're doing a mission or a submission, and you're evacuating and you're calling it down in advance. That's when you would do it. Or you've identified a bug nest or an automaton factory and you're calling it down in advance. So that's where it would be useful. The next one is the shield generator, which generates a shield. This could be useful. The cooldown time is quite low, so this definitely has the potential to be useful. The only problem with it is that it takes up a stratagem slot, so I would only take this if you're playing with a team in advance, right? If you're playing solo, I definitely wouldn't bother taking this, because most of the enemies are melee, so it's really only useful against the automatons, and the automatons have enemies that are melee as well. Like, I was playing a last mission, I got killed by berserkers because they used to come out of nowhere. So static emplacements are not really that good. You don't want to be staying in the same spot too often, and I'd rather have a mortar sentry. Next one is the Tesla Tower. It does damage to enemies. You can avoid friendly fire by remaining prone. I haven't used this. I don't really see a point to it. It just basically replaces a Gatling sentry. The one good thing about it is that because it kills in an arc near it, it's much better at dealing with melee enemies than the Gatling sentry is. That being said, because of the short range, I don't know if I would take this over the Gatling sentry. But it could have a use, especially if you're combining it with. It does combine. There is a module that affects this, so if you have that, it could probably be useful. But I don't know that it would replace a Gatling sentry. The only benefit that it has over the Gatling sentry is that it won't kill you if you're far away from it, because the Gatling sentry can still kill you if you're not careful. Because if an enemy appears behind you, it could shoot at you through you to hit the enemy. The next one is the engineering bay. You've got the anti-personnel minefield. I don't know if I like this. I have used it before, but the call-in time is quite high, and it's just not as good as a mortar sentry, because each of the mines are single use, right? So it'll stop one swarm of enemies, but it won't stop any more than that, right? Whereas a mortar sentry will stop multiple swarms of enemies, right? So, like I said, I don't really see a use for this. Maybe combined with other like sentries, it could be useful. But like I said, I think a mortar sentry is better. I don't think that this is useful. Next one is the supply backpack. This is very good, but it's much better for your team than it is for you. Basically, it allows you to distribute. It holds 4 slots for extra ammunition for your teammates, right? So very useful in a support capacity, especially if you're playing with an extra team. But since I mostly play solo, I don't find this very useful. I have used it, but it's more so if you're playing in a team, very useful for making sure that, because it's basically you carry extra ammunition for your team with you, which is very, very useful. Very good if you're playing with a teammate who's got the stalwart machine gun. Very useful. The next one is the grenade launcher. I'm not a big fan of this because if I could take it as a primary weapon, I would really like it. But because it takes up the support weapon slot, I tend to find that the stalwart's much better in a support weapon slot. But that being said, though, if you are taking the Guard Dog Rover backpack to get you that extra laser rifle, or the other backpack, the Guard Dog, then you could potentially take this, right? The useful thing about it is that it can destroy bug tunnels, which actually does make it very useful. Because normally bug tunnels require grenades, and you need to have a grenade that doesn't destroy on impact, so that it can bounce into the bug nest. Because otherwise you have to be very accurate with your grenade throws, especially with the ones that detonate on impact. It's very, very difficult to, at least it is for me. Before someone in the comments says, I can easily do that. Well, it's not for me. The next one is the laser cannon. As you can see, I own it. I bought it to try it once. I don't necessarily like it, but I can see that it has value, especially if you're taking a primary weapon that's very high in magazine capacity. This could be very useful. As you can see here, it's a heat and a beam weapon, and it does have a... So the way that it works is that you have a certain number of power generators with it, right? Now the power generators don't get used up unless you overheat the weapon. So as soon as the weapon overheats, you have to load another ammunition for it. I don't really find it very useful. Simply put, because I tend to take the stalwart and a medium armor penetrating weapon, but it can be useful. It definitely has a very high cooldown time, so you won't be calling this in defensively, you'll be calling this in advance. The next is incendiary mines. This is probably better than the anti-personnel mines because they light the area on fire at least, which means they have a effect over time, which is really what these mines are supposed to do. They're supposed to sort of deny the enemy access to an area. The incendiary mines basically do it better. It's a straight upgrade to the anti-personnel mines. There's literally no reason to take the anti-personnel mines once you've got the incendiary mines. The next is the Guard Dog Rover, which is a drone that has a laser rifle. Really good for getting an extra gun. A lot of people do take this. I have seen them take it, or the other Rover, the one with the Liberator rifle. It doesn't require a backpack, so you can't take it with anything else that requires a backpack, like say any weapons that require a backpack. You can't take it with any of those. So that would include the recoilless rifle, the airburst rocket launcher, etc. You can only have one backpack on. So very useful to understand. The next is the ballistic shield backpack. Now it is a backpack, so it does take up a backpack slot. It protects against small arms fire, but you can only use a one-handed weapon while you're using it. If you happen to get your hands onto a one-hand medium armor penetrating weapon, it could actually be really good. I don't know if I would take it I would rather take the stalwart and just kill my enemies, but I can see a use for this, especially if you need to get close to enemies. Haven't used it myself, but if you are going to take it, you want to take a one-handed weapon. There is a one-handed pistol that has medium armor penetrating, so you could take a one-handed SMG and a one-handed medium armor penetrating weapon in order to deal with and basically be able to walk up to enemies and shoot them. I haven't tried it myself, but I definitely will at some point. The next is the arc thrower, which shoots arc. As you can see here, it's good for dealing with swarms up close. I don't really use it myself because I don't normally like to get close to enemies. I would rather just shoot them with the stalwart machine gun. But if you like getting close and personal, could be a better version than the flamethrower, to be honest, because it arcs to enemies that are close. Next one is anti-tank mines, which is anti-tank mines. So they're explosive and heavy armor and anti-tank. I don't really take mines, but they have their uses. I think if you were playing in a team, this would be more useful, because it would be useful combined with any... But normally, because I play solo, I don't really tend to take this. That's level 18, that's level 20, so we're not going to bother with those. I haven't unlocked these, so we're not going to bother with those. We'll come to the robotics workshop. The first sentry you unlock is the machine gun sentry. It's a sentry, which means that it will attack all enemies near it. Be aware though, if you end up between it and an enemy, it will shoot you, and it can kill you quite easily. So you sort of have to be very careful when deploying this sentry. You kind of want to make sure that you're not in the line of fire. You also want to check your map regularly to make sure that there isn't enemies coming up behind you. If you are using it, it would probably be better to get prone just to be on the safe side. The cooldown time is quite low, but the call-in time is quite high. So, if you are calling this defensively, you're probably going to be running away from an enemy, and then calling it in. Next up is the Gatling Sentry. It's a straight upgrade to the machine gun sentry. Once you've got the Gatling Sentry, there's no reason to take the machine gun sentry. It does everything the machine gun sentry does and more. It has a higher cooldown time, but it's going to kill considerably more enemies, so it's a straight upgrade. There's no reason to take the machine gun sentry once you've taken the Gatling Sentry. The next one is one of my babies, the Mortar Sentry. This is always a must-take for me, like the Stalwart is. Because it's a Mortar Sentry, it has an arcing range of fire, which means it can fire over obstacles, which makes it very useful. Because it's explosive, it will knock enemies down. So it's one of the best sentries in my opinion. I always take it. I barely take any of the other sentries. This is my sentry of choice. Because it's explosive and it's medium armor penetrating, it pretty much kills everything that it needs to kill. And anything that it doesn't kill, you can kill with other weapons. So my sentry of choice. Just be aware though, if you run away from this, it can kill you. You do not want to let enemies get close to you when you've got the mortar sentry, because it will target enemies even if they're close to you. It definitely can kill you, so it's something to be aware of. Next one is the guard dog, which is it uses a machine gun instead of an assault rifle instead of a laser weapon. It's a backpack weapon. It's medium armor penetrating, which is important to understand. It actually has better armor penetration than the regular primary assault rifles. Medium armor penetrating is really good, because it means it will kill just about everything. It is a backpack weapon, so be aware you can't take this along with other backpack things like the recoilless rifle and the jump pack, the airburst rocket launcher, etc. Now we come to the rocket sentry. This one is situational. If you have a mission to eliminate charges or tanks, I haven't seen any mission to eliminate tanks, but if you have missions to eliminate charges, this one could be useful, especially if you draw the charger to you, because it will primarily aim at larger enemies. But unless you have a very specific need for it, you're not going to be taking it. It just doesn't have a place over. Normally, big enemies you can focus fire on, and it's normally the swarms of enemies that are more dangerous. Next one is... oh, well, that's the end of it. Cool. That was the end of our guide to the stratagems. This was Gman Gaming and Reviews. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already done so. I will probably be doing a video on ship modules next. I'd love to hear about your favorite stratagems, your comments and thoughts on this video. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already done so. And I will see you on the next one. Alright, bye everyone.